Hello, everyone. This is the 144th episode of the Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles and the Soccer Nostalgia blog. Unfortunately, Mr. Paul Whittle from the 1888 letter blog could not make it this time. For this episode, I welcome back Argentine journalist Mr. Nacho Dimari as we discuss the Argentine national team matches under Cesar Luis Menotti in the year 1979. We aim to have this series of interviews with Mr. Dimari as we examine this era of the Argentine national team. Welcome.
It's
Yeah.
very nice to be here once again, talking and discussing this important year of Argentine national team.
As the year 1979 started, Argentina were the new defending World Cup champions. What was the state of the affairs in Argentine football?
Everybody was happy, and I think that Menotti was at that time parting his works between the national team and the youth national team, which was going to play in the World Cup in Japan. That was something that at the time was very special because it was the same trainer was going to train the national team and the youth team at the same time. But it was very important because some new players were starting to emerge, and we will see during this discussion that they were starting to have the possibility of join the national team.
Early in the year, in January, Cesar Luis Menotti himself oversaw Argentina's under 20 squad's qualification matches for this under 20 World Cup to be played in around August and September. Why do you think he
Mhm.
was personally involved?
Well, perhaps the right answer will be that in that team there was a new, very good player named Diego Armando Maradona, and all the team that surrounded Maradona. It was very special, and it was created by Cesar Luis Menotti. So I think that he may feel or felt at that time that he was the father of the creature. So he wanted to have his chance with that team and to watch her little lads grow up.
But first things first, the Federation had to renegotiate Menotti's contract. Can you explain the situation and how it was resolved?
Well, they have to renegotiate, but the most important thing was that there was not any other manager at that time who could take in charge what Menotti done. It was Menotti who will be the only person with the possibility of try to make better in the next 4 years. I mean, from 78 till 82 to the World Cup in Spain, because at that time there was no qualification for the team who was the actual champion. So Argentina was already qualified for Spain 82. And I think that Menotti at that time wanted to continue with all his work. And perhaps, and we will see in this program and in the next podcast too, that he was thinking of adding different new players, youth players, that will be very important for the national team in the future.
We have to add that the then AFA president was Alfredo Cantillo, and he stepped down actually in April because he felt Menotti's salary demands were too high. So a
Mhm.
committee was formed by the then Independiente president Julio Grondona to
Mhm.
handle the contract situation. And he
Mhm.
reached an agreement, and we know that eventually this will pave the way for him to become the AFA president. Grondona, I mean.
That's right. Grondona was a very intelligent president. At that time, Independiente was one of the most important teams with very good players, and he was one of the teams that in the Copa Libertadores always reached the finals stages, and that gave Grondona the opportunity to enter the AFA When he reached the agreement with Menotti, as you said, that was his most important step to finally become the president of the Asociación del Fútbol Argentino.
The most important objective of the national team was the tour of Europe in the summer of 1979. Menotti
Mhm.
felt that these types of tours were very important in terms of the preparation.
Yes, as I told before, there was no qualifying round in the next 3 years. So Menotti always thought that playing the most important teams in Europe will be the best way to stay competitive amongst the most important teams. He also knew that the team that became world champion in 78 would have some modifications. I don't know if the key players would still be in the team, but he was trying to find another players to give that team a more important, talented players to accomplish what he would try to do. That was to become another time world champion in Spain 82.
He had stated that some players would not be selected because of their age by the time of the next World Cup. He also said that he would not include players with foreign clubs. Alberto Tarantini, he received a recall, even though he was playing for a foreign club before, I think for Birmingham, but he was recalled after he returned to Argentina. Other players to be left out included Luis Galvan, Ruben Paganini, Daniel Killer, and Ricardo Boccini. And Norberto Alonso was also left out because he had
Mhm.
criticized Menotti in the past. The team included many 1978 players. This included captain Daniel Passarella, goalkeeper Ubaldo Filiol, and Hector
Mhm.
Ballet, Jorge Olguin, Tarantini, we mentioned, Americo
Mhm. Gallego.
Gallego, yeah,
Mhm.
Oviedo, Valencia, Hausmann, Luque, and Ortiz.
Mhm.
Before going to Europe, Argentina has a friendly on April 25th at the Monumental at Buenos Aires against Bulgaria.
Mhm.
So for this match, we have the following lineup: Filol of River Plate, Jorge Olguin of San Lorenzo, making his international debut and his only cap, Jorge Alberto Garcia of Rosario Central, Daniel Passarella, captain of the team from River Plate, an international debutant, Hugo Villaverde of Independiente,
Mhm.
Diego Armando Maradona of Argentinos Juniors, Americo Gallego of Newell's Old Boys, another international debutant, Juan Alberto Barbas of Racing Club,
Mhm.
and he'd be replaced by another international debutant, Jose Luis Gaitan of Rosario Central in the 64th minute.
Mhm.
Oscar Ortiz of River Plate, he'd be replaced by another international debutant, Hugo Perotti of Boca Juniors in the 66th minute. Another international debutant, Jose Omar Renaldi of Talleres de Cordoba, and Rene Hausmann of Huracan. Argentina wins this match 2-1. Hausmann scores in the third minute. Risto Bonef ties the match in the 10th minute. And in the 60th minute, Passarella scores with a penalty kick, and Argentina win this first match 2-1 before heading
Mhm.
out to Europe.
About that team, you will notice that two players, Maradona, of course, Ibarbas, they were from the youth team.
Yes, this would be the year where Diego Maradona would be launched into the football world and would become a global star. Where was he at this point in his career?
There were still discussions of if Maradona would had the chance to be in the team in 1978. And of course, he was playing in a very high level in Argentinos Juniors. And his first matches in the national team and in the youth national team were showing that he was in a very climbing to the top playing. He was a very important and key player, of course, in Argentinos Juniors, scoring a lot of goals. And that was very important for him to have Menotti as maybe his footballistical father.
Argentina's tour of Europe started on May 22nd at Switzerland, at Bern.
Mhm.
This was a special match to commemorate the 75th anniversary of FIFA. They were replaying the previous year's final against
That's
the
right.
Netherlands. Now, this is a Netherlands that has some of the stars that we know: Wim Janssen, Ruud Krol, the captain, Niskens, Johnny Rep, among others. For Argentina, we have the following lineup: Filol, Villaverde, Olgin, Tarantini, who was playing for Talleres de Cordoba at this point, Passarella, captain of team, Osvaldo Ardiles, who's playing at Tottenham in England. Him and Ricardo Villa had joined Tottenham following the World Cup in 1978. Gallego, Diego Maradona, Daniel Bertoni, who was playing at Sevilla in Spain. He'd be replaced by Hausmann in the 67th minute. Leopoldo Luque of River Plate. He'd be replaced by Barbas in the 61st minute. Oscar Ortiz, and he'd be replaced by Enzo Trocero of Independiente in the 85th minute. From the previous year's World Cup final, Galvan and Mario Kempes were missing. This would be Oscar Ortiz's final cap for Argentina, his 23rd and final cap. His first cap had been in 1975. This match would end as a scoreless tie. It would be decided on a penalty kick shootout.
That's right.
In the end, Argentina won 8-7 on the penalty kicks. This match marked Diego Maradona's debut on the world stage.
It was a very important match. It was sell worldwide as the La Revancha, the revenge, that everybody thought that at that time the Dutch team, Holland, was with a lot of players, even if they were still having some new players, like I think Jan Peters, who was a midfield, used to play in that team. It was a very important match because everybody wanted to win that trophy, but because there was a trophy because of the celebration of the
FIFA Jubilee.
five. That's right. And I remember that for Maradona, it was very important because it was like he was playing in the same team that used to play the final in 78. Even though there were some modifications, the most of the players took part in the World Cup in 78.
A few days later, on May 26th, Italy hosted Argentina at Roma. So the day
Mm.
before the match, Pope John Paul II received both squads. As far as the Italian team, it was very similar to the one from 1978. So we
Mhm.
have the likes of the captain Dino Zoff, Gentile, Cabrini, Scirea, Causio, Tardelli, Paolo Rossi,
Paolo Rossi.
and Antonioni, Bettega, managed by the legendary Enzo Bearzot.
It was a great team.
Indeed.
You you will see that in 82.
For this match, we have Filol, Olguin, Tarantini, Gallego, Villaverde, Passarella, captain of the team, Hausmann, Barbas. He was replaced by Miguel Oviedo of Talleres de Cordoba in the 68th minute, Luque, Maradona, and Valencia. So Valencia would give Argentina the lead in the 7th minute. Italy would tie the match in the 25th minute from Franco Causio. Italy would take the lead in the 55th minute through Paolo Rossi. But just a minute later, Scirea fouled Maradona in the box, and Passarella scored from a penalty kick. The match ended in a diplomatic 2-2 tie.
It's important to remember that in 78, Italy was the only team who defeat the world champions, Argentina. In the group stages, we lost again this same Italy 1-0 with a goal scored by Betega. So it was some kind of revenge that Argentina was looking for. And at least we managed to tie that match.
And we have the famous photograph of Paolo Rossi with Diego Maradona that I'm sure everyone has seen on Twitter or other on Facebook, etc. Yeah,
Mm.
I think that was the first matchup between the two, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, because then Paolo Rossi, I think that a year later he has this
Yes,
trouble with the
right.
Totocalcio and
Yeah,
was suspended from the national team for a couple of years.
yes. Next, Argentina would travel to Britain. First, they have a friendly on May 29th as part of a UNICEF benefit match against the Republic of Ireland. Now, interestingly, the Republic of Ireland does not consider this match to be official, though Argentina considers to be official.
I didn't
I
know
don't
that.
exactly know the reasons. Yeah. Nevertheless, Ireland had many of their famous players, the likes of Liam Brady, Frank Stapleton, John Giles, who was also the manager. For Argentina, Menotti decided to rest some of the players, and many of the stars did not start this match. These included Passarella, Gallego, Luque, and Maradona. For this match, we have Filol. In Passarella's absence, Olguin was the captain. Tarantini, he'd be replaced by Americo Gallego in the 36th minute. Trocero, Villaverde, Valencia, Barbas, Oviedo, Hausmann, Perotti, he'd be replaced by Maradona in the second half in the 46th minute. Reinaldi, and he replaced by international debutant Norberto Daniel Utes of Independiente in the 46th minute. So for
Mhm.
Perotti, this was his second and final cap. For Rinaldi, this was the second and final cap. As well as Oviedo, this was his 10th and final cap. His first cap had been in 1975. This match would end as a scoreless tie, but since Menotti decided to rest so many of his players, perhaps Argentina did not play this match at full force.
Mhm. Yes, I think that he wanted to look to other players. He already knew what Passarella was capable of, the same as Gallego. So I think that he gave the opportunity to other players to show his way and what were the chances to become regular players in the national team. For example, Otis was the striker of Independiente at that time.
Now we come to the match where the world for sure takes notice of Diego Maradona.
Mhm.
So on June 2nd at Glasgow at Hampton Park, Scotland host Argentina. For this match, we have Filol, Olguin, Villaverde. He'd be replaced by Trocero in the 21st minute when he was injured. Passarella, captain of the team. Tarantini, Gallego, Barbas, Maradona, Hausmann. He replaced by Utes in the 54th minute, Luque, and Valencia. And for Scotland, we have some familiar faces. Alan Hansen,
Mhm.
John Ward, Kenny Dalglish, captaining of the team, Asa Hartford,
Alan Roth, the
Alan Ruff in
goalkeeper.
goal, of course, yes. Argentina would take the lead in the 33rd minute when Maradona got past a number of Scottish defenders and passed to Luque for the first goal. In the 61st minute, Luque would score the second goal. In the 70th minute, we have Maradona scoring his very first international goal. He received the ball on the left side
Mm.
on the of the edge of the box and lobbed the ball over George Wood. Scotland would pull a goal back in the 85th minute, but it was all about Maradona for this match. At the end of the match, The crowd applauded Argentina's positive play and chanted Argentina, Argentina. A memorable match
I,
for many reasons.
I think it was the starting of this love situation between Maradona and the Scottish people, because after that and what he did in '86 marked his very fine
Oh,
relationship with Scotland.
this match against Scotland, like I mentioned, it's really the true birth of Maradona in terms of global consciousness, certainly for a British
Mhm.
crowd. Do you remember where you were watching this match and what was the reaction back home? And were you conscious that everything had changed for Maradona in a way?
I don't remember exactly where was I at that time. I sure remember that I watched that match. It was not like nowadays where you can see in your phone you are able to see every match. But I thought that I remember that it was a very important tour for the national team, and this match against Scotland was one of the most beautiful matches played by Argentina, not only in that tour, but I may say in all the Menotti era. And Maradona was just incredible, and he was starting to show the world what he would become years later. I remember that the magazine El Gráfico was with a lot of photos and content about this tour, because it was a very important tour for a team who was at that time the world champion. And as I said before, playing with important teams in Europe.
On the way back home, Argentina play a friendly in the United States against the New York Cosmos. This is 4 days after the Scotland match on June 6th. The match had been arranged for financial reasons, and I believe Menotti had been against it. Let's remind everyone that the match was played in an artificial turf. The match was played in the Giant Stadium at East Rutherford,
Mhm.
New Jersey. And for the New York Cosmos, we have a number of familiar faces: the Brazilian defender Marinho, the Dutchman Reisbergen, Carlos Alberto, captain of Brazil from 1970, Giorgio Chinaglia, the Italian striker, and
Yes.
Englishman Dennis Tuort. For Argentina, we have Filol, Olguin, Oviedo, Passarella, Tarantini, Barbas, Gallego, Maradona, Hausmann, Luque. He'd be replaced by Utes in the 61st minute, and Valencia. The match was decided 2 minutes before the end when Valencia took a free kick from the left side and Passarella jumped and scored with a header. Yeah.
He's
But
still in the air, Pasarela.
yeah. But afterwards, Menotti stated that he would never authorize the national team to play this type of a match. He added that he understood that there were financial imperatives for these type of matches, but definitely not in those types of conditions, meaning the field and also the type of the opponent.
If you ask me what I remember of that match, it's not something related to the game, but to the thing that the Argentine players, most of them used sneakers to play tennis sneakers to play that match. And it was very strange visually to see that. But those days, the artificial field were very different, like nowadays that are practically perfect. And even though if coaches complain actually about that, I think that Menotti was afraid of losing some of his players because of playing in that artificial field.
On June 25th, on the first anniversary of the World Cup win, the Argentine newspaper Clarín organized a match between Argentina and a world selection.
Yes.
And the world selection will be managed by Enzo Bierzo, the manager of Italy. This world selection would include the likes of Emerson Leao, the Brazilian goalkeeper, Ruud Krol, the Dutch captain, who would also captain this international team, Cabrini, Italian defender, Michel Platini,
Oof.
Frenchman, Zico, Marco Tardelli, Asensi, the Spanish midfielder from Barcelona, Causio, and Paolo Rossi, the Italians, the new Polish superstar,
Well,
Zbigniew Boniek.
yes.
A very good team, a very good selection. For Argentina, we have Filol, Olguin, Luis Galvan of Talleres de Cordoba,
Mhm.
Pasarella, captain of the team, Tarantini, Osvaldo Ardiles, Gallego, Maradona, Hausmann, Luque, and he'd be replaced by Utes in the 46th minute, and Valencia. For Utes, this was his third and final cap, all of them in this year. For Rene Hausmann, this was his 55th and final cap for Argentina. His first cap had been in 1973.
It was almost the same team that became world champion a year before with the adding of Maradona.
In the 28th minute, Maradona would give Argentina the lead when he received a cross from Valencia on the right side, and then he curled the shot past Leao on the top left corner. The FIFA World Stars, as they were called, would tie the match in the 68th minute when Luis Galvan, under pressure from Paolo Rossi, scored into his own net. In the 73rd minute, Zico would score the winner. 3 minutes later, Marco Tardelli, let's remember this is an exhibition friendly match. Marco Tardelli, who was marking Maradona throughout this match, he was sent off for a very brutal foul on Maradona. The match ended as a 2-1 win for the World Stars, and a year later, Ruud Krol was able to lift a trophy, if not the
Mm.
FIFA World Cup trophy.
I remember that they used a blue shirt, I think, the rest of the world team, and that the Estadio Monumental was full because it was very important to see all those important players in one match. It was a very good match in the sense of nobody cared the result, even thought nobody wants to lose. It was a match like the French said, sans enjeu. It was not important, but
Yeah.
very
Sans enjeu.
very
Yeah.
nice
Yeah.
to see.
Yeah.
Sans enjeu.
After the match, Menotti stated that festivities were over. Now it's the serious business of preparation for the World Cup.
Yes.
Let's talk about Hausmann, Rene Hausmann. This was his last
Mm.
match. What can you say about his career for Argentina national team?
I think that Joseman was one of the most important right attackers in the history of Argentine football. I'm not discovering anything, but if he would have another type of life off the fields, perhaps, no, perhaps, I'm sure that he would remain in the national team and in the top form for 5 more years without no doubt. But at that time, he was starting to make different choices that forced him to give the hurrah in the national team. And even if Menotti knew him a lot because he was one of his footballistical fathers, he knew that he won't make it to be in the team in a good form 3 years later in Spain. As a player, he was perhaps one of the 5 strikers or attackers in the history of Argentine because he was one of a kind. Nobody knew what he was going to do, Houseman. And even if he played in the right wing, he scores a lot of goals. He was a very important player, a key player for Menotti in his first years in the national team.
Just like 1975, the 1979 edition of the Copa America was not seen as an important objective, and Menotti, just like 1975, used it as a laboratory to experiment with new players. As far as the public, was there any interest from the Argentine public about the Copa America?
Yes, because the Copa America was always the possibility to face Brazil and Uruguay, who are the two rivals, more important rivals that Argentina has historically here in South America. So at that time, Argentina was not always in a very good form in those tournaments. So everybody wanted to win the Copa America because Argentina was the World Cup champion. So all those years between the 1978 and 82, everybody wanted to see the Argentina, and all the other teams wanted to defeat Argentina, like now, like nowadays.
The Copa America would be in the months of July and August 1979. For its first match, Argentina traveled to La Paz on July 18th to face Bolivia. For the Argentina, the starting lineup contained 10 debutants and only Daniel Passarella as the only experienced player. In goal, we have Enric Vidale of Gimnasia y Esgrima, Eduardo Saporiti of River Plate, Jose Vantuin of Rosario Central, Passarella we mentioned, Miguel Angel Bordon of Boca Juniors, Jorge Osvaldo Gaspari of Quilmes, Pedro Omar Laraki of Vélez Sarsfield, Carlos Angel Lopez of Racing Club, Jose Antonio Castro of Vélez Sarsfield, Sergio Fortunato of Estudiantes. He'd be replaced by Jose Gaitan of Rosario Central in the 59th minute, Roberto Osvaldo Diaz of Racing Club, and he'd be replaced by Hugo Cochia of San Lorenzo in the 46th minute. Of the starters, all except Passarella were debutants.
It was a team with no history besides Pasarela. Also because the match was played in, I don't know, it was in La Paz.
La Paz, yeah.
So
Altitude.
Menotti always tried to send players, perhaps that he thought that they were with the capability of playing in the high, and that team was I'm regarding right now, and there were little, I think, one or two players that used to play more than 3 or 4 matches in the national team.
And the match, Bolivia 1-1. Carlos Angel Lopez had given Argentina the lead in the 5th minute, but Jesus Reinaldo scored twice in the 29th and 66th minute, and Bolivia won this match. The next match was on August 2nd against Brazil at Rio at Maracana. For Brazil, we have players like Emerson Leao, Edinho, Paulo Cesar Carpegiani, Zico, among others, managed by
Mhm.
Claudio Coutinho. For Argentina, we have Vidale, Barbas,
Mhm.
Vantuin, Passarella, Bordon, Gaspari, Laraki, Gaitan. He replaced by Carlos Lopez in the 46th minute. Cochia, Maradona, Roberto Diaz. He replaced by Jose Castro in the 62nd minute. For Gaitan,
Mhm.
this was his third and final cap. Brazil would win this match 2-1. Zico scored in the 2nd minute. Cochia tied the match in the 29th minute. Tita scored the winner in the 54th minute.
Yes, from that team, I think that with Passarella, only 2 or 3 players would survive and continue playing with the national team. The other ones didn't have any other chances.
On August 8th, they host Bolivia at Buenos Aires at the Estadio de Vélez Sarsfield. For this match, we have Vidale, Saporiti, Vantuin, Passarella, Bordon, Gaspari, Laraki. This would be Laraki's third and final cap. He'd be replaced by Barbas in the 46th minute, Maradona, Coxia, Fortunato, and Roberto Diaz. Argentina won this match 3-0. Passarella scored in the first minute, Gaspari the second in the 15th minute, and Maradona scored in the 65th minute.
It was a very different match playing in from the one playing in La Paz. As usual, the Bolivian national team, when they don't play in La Paz in the altitude, they have a very different type of play. And in that team from Argentina, I remember that the left winger Roberto Diaz was from Racing Club. He was called El Ropero, that's the wardrobe, because he was a very big player. And that team also, besides as Passarella, Maradona, I think that Van Twin, continue player with the national team, Barbas, of course, but the other players, they didn't manage to keep the desired level Menotti wanted to continue playing in Argentina. The Copa America was not played as is used to be right now. I mean that you play in one country. You used to play one match in Bolivia, the other
Right.
ones again
Home
Bolivia
and
and
away, yes.
Argentina. You play Brazil in Brazil. That's right. That's right. That was the form of the Copa America at that time.
And it would remain so until 1983. In fact, the 1987 edition in Argentina was when they reformatted the Copa America
Mm-hmm.
structure. Argentina played its final match in the Copa America on August 23rd. They hosted Brazil at Buenos Aires at El Monumental. For Brazil, we have other familiar faces besides Emerson Leon Edinho. We have Junior, we have Falcao, who would come in the second half, and Socrates. This would be the match where Zico gets sent off, as well as Americo Gallego in the 27th minute.
Mm.
For Argentina, we have Vidale, Victorio Ocaño of Talares de Cordoba, Vantuin, Passarella, Bordon, Gaspari, Gallego, Ricardo Boccini of Independiente, Coxia, he replaced by Valencia in the 59th minute, Fortunato, he replaced by Jose Castro in the 79th minute, and Roberto Diaz. For Bordon, this will be his fourth and final cap. All of his caps during this Copa America.
Mm-hmm.
This match would end as a 2-2 tie. Socrates gave Brazil the lead with a header. Passarella tied the match in the 38th minute with a free kick. Socrates scored from a penalty kick in a twice retaken penalty kick in the 65th minute. And finally, in the 71st minute, Roberto Diaz tied the match. Argentina were eliminated. As far as the Copa America, like you said, it's just experimentation to see which players would make an impact in the long term future of the
Mm-hmm.
national team. And in this case, not many of them were recalled after this.
That's right. If you see the names between the players that were picked up to the tour in Europe and the players that used to play in this Copa America, there were, besides Pasarela, Maradona, Barbas, I think that no other players used to play the tour in Europe and the Copa America. So it was 100% Menotti trying to find some players that he believed at the time would have the opportunity to continue playing in the national team. But I think that besides Bantuin, I think that Bantuin made it to the World Cup in '82. No other player from this group of the Copa America managed to arrive to that objective of playing in the next World Cup. I think that Menotti was trying to give the opportunity to different players and it was fair, even thought if the results of 1979 were perhaps not so good, because I think that Argentina only won 3 or 4 matches from all that year. And we have to imagine that Argentina was the World Cup champion at that time. But Menotti, as I told before, knew that there was no trouble for qualifying to the World Cup because Argentina was still the champion at that time. But also always said that not playing very difficult, because it was not easy to put the players in a position of being playing for the points, as we said here in Argentina, jugar por los puntos. I mean, all the matches were friendly matches, except the Copa America, but all the other matches, as no qualification was required, were only friendly matches. So it's very difficult, that part of the management for Menotti and others managers that used to have the same position.
The legend and status of Diego Maradona increased with the victory of the Under 20 World Cup in August and September. Argentina were now World Cup champions in two categories. How was this
Mhm.
Under 20 title celebrated and analyzed back home?
That youth championship was something incredible because it was played in Japan. That World Cup was played in Japan. So for Argentina, we had 12 hours difference. And I remember that I was going to school, and the matches, we used to have a television in the classroom
Oh, wow.
to let us watch the matches in school. And that team was one of the most enjoyable teams to see playing, because you have Maradona and Ramon Diaz, who was the striker of that World Cup. He formed with Maradona one of the most important, we said here, societies of players. They were at a very top level, and that Argentine team was perhaps one of the most beautiful teams to watch. As I said before, we have, of course, Maradona, who was perhaps at the top of his career at that time, of course. Barbas was also one of the most important players of that team. Ramon Diaz, Gabriel Calderon, who also he used to play in a wing, left or right. And Menotti could have the chance to keep those players that I mentioned in the national team, and they made it until the World Cup in '82. So here in Argentina, people was very happy with the continuity between the national team and the World Cup that was won in Argentina in '78. This was perhaps something that Menotti managed. You asked me before if Menotti was clearly was aware that he will have to manage these two teams in the same year. And I think that Menotti, he decided to make it because he wanted to give this youth team the possibility of play in the best level, and they played what was called here spectacle football. It was some kind of, I may not compare it as total football for the Dutch, but it was a team that played a very beautiful football to see at that time. As I told you before, I remember that every match that was played in a week time, we used to watch it at school. It was incredible. We were all shouting, and it was something incredible. I remember that the people went to the Obelisco in the center of Buenos Aires to go there and make all the jubilee of winning again 1 year later, from '78, winning again an important competition. that was the youth competition in '79.
Come to think of it, I think Menotti must be the only manager to have won the World Cup at both categories. Someone can check
Uh,
me on that, but I think he might be.
Perhaps, yeah. From Argentina, surely not, because neither Bilardo and Scaloni have the possibility of manage the youth team. Maybe it's a record for Menotti of being world champion with the youth team and with the first national team from Argentina.
In September, Menotti takes Argentina to another tour of Europe with mostly the experimental squad, plus Passarella and Gallego as far as the older heads. On September 12th at West Berlin, they faced West Germany. This is the West Germany that has Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, Klaus Fischer, Bernd Schuster,
Kals.
Karl-Heinz, Karls and Forster, among others. For Argentina, we have Vidale, international debutant Juan Carlos Bujedo of Vélez Sarsfield, Passarella, Vantuin, Ocaño, Gallego, Gaspari, international debutant Patricio Hernandez of Estudiantes,
Mhm.
Hugo Cochia, he replaced by Jose Castro in the 54th minute, Fortunato, he'd be replaced by international debutant Ramon Angel Diaz of River
Yeah.
Plate in the 46th minute.
Mhm.
Roberto Diaz, and he'd be replaced by Carlos Lopez in the 56th minute. For Gaspari, this was his fifth and final cap, all of them in 1979. The West Germans score through Klaus Allofs in the 47th minute. In the 58th minute, Rummenigge heads in the second goal. In the 84th minute, Diaz crossed on the left side and Castro struck in Argentina's goal. A 2-1 loss.
The German team was a very important one with key players like you mentioned, Rummenigge, Alof, Fischer. They won the Euro Cup a year later. Yes, they won against Belgium. There was a very big team. From this team in Argentina, I think that Bantuin, Pasarela, Patricio Hernandez, Gallego, Ramon Diaz made it to the World Cup in Spain.
A few days later, on September 16th, they traveled to Belgrade to face Yugoslavia. Now, this is a talented Yugoslavian side that includes the Vujovic twins, Zoran and Zlatko, Safet Susic, who would score a hat trick, Blaz Sliskovic, Vladimir Petrovic, Zajic, and Ivica Suryak, amongst others, managed by the
Mhm.
legendary Milan Miljanic. For Argentina, we have Vidale, Vantuin, Bujedo, Ocaño, Gallego, Pasarella, Cochia. He replaced by Ramon Diaz in the 46th minute. Carlos Lopez, Fortunato, Patricio Hernandez, Roberto Diaz, and he'd be replaced by Jose Castro in the 55th minute. For Vidale, this was his sixth and final cap. For Carlos Lopez, this was his fourth and final cap. For Jose Castro, this was his fifth and final cap. For Fortunato, this was his fifth and final cap. For Roberto Diaz, this was his sixth and final cap. And for Cochia, this was his ninth and final cap. His first cap had been in 1975. Most of his players who were part of the experimentation for this year, this was the last we saw of them. As far as the match itself, Safet Susic would score a hat trick in the 22nd, 53rd, and 70th minute. Daniel Passarella would score with an indirect free kick in the 82nd minute. But on the 86th minute, Blaz Sliskovic scored after a solo run. 1 minute before the end, Ramon Diaz scored his first goal and Argentina's second goal. And the match ended as a 4-2 win for Yugoslavia. Two matches, two losses, but Menotti saw what he could see from those players, whether he wanted to keep them or not.
Yeah, that's right.
What was the future for players with foreign clubs, such as Mario Kempes at Valencia, Bertoni at Sevilla, Tarantini, who had been at Birmingham, Ardiles at Tottenham, and even Ricardo Villa at Tottenham.
I remember that, for example, for Ardiles and Villa, it was a little revolution here in Argentina for them playing in Tottenham and winning the first trophy. I think they won the FA Cup with a goal
81,
score,
yeah.
yeah, by Villa years before. But it was something that it was not as usual nowadays. I mean, nowadays, for example, Little Devil Diablito Echeverri played 10 matches in River Plate, and Manchester City is going to have it next year. At that time, it was very different because not all the foreign players were able or had the possibility of play in the other European leagues, because there was a limit of 2 or 3 players at maximum, at least, to that were permit to play in the foreign leagues. So at that time, the most players of the Argentine team used to play here in Argentina. It was exactly the opposite what happens nowadays. Nowadays, you have perhaps non-player of the Argentine league in the national team, and at that time you have perhaps 70% of the players used to play in Argentina. So that was very strange if we look nowadays, because you have Pasarela, Gallego, Filiol, I don't know, Luque. They all play here in Argentina. Ramon Diaz, he played at River Plate. Maradona played in Argentinos Juniors. And that's something that years after would be a tendency that would invert completely. But I think that 79 was a very important year for Argentine football, not only because we managed to win the Youth World Cup in Japan, but because of the possibility of having the possibility of kept Menotti as the brain of the national team, because that gave the possibility as all the players that used to play with him the year before in the World Cup, and those that I mentioned that play in the youth national team, to make a melange between those two winning teams and offer, at least in the papers, the possibility of arrive to the World Cup in Spain. I think that perhaps in names, it was most important the team that would make it in Spain that the one in here in Argentina. In names, okay?
Yeah. And the players are that you mentioned from the under 20 World Cup squad are Maradona, of course, Barbas, and Ramon Diaz.
And Calderon.
And
Also,
Gabriel Calderon, yes.
Gabriel Calderon played also in the World Cup in '82. So I think that Menotti was a very magnificent trainer and manager, and he knew what was the most important for the national team. He wanted to make perhaps a cocktail between the experienced players like Filiol, Passarella, Gallego, Tarantini, and the youth players that played an incredible World Cup in Japan, like Maradona, Calderon, Barbas, and Ramon Diaz.
In closing, at the end of this year, was it self evident that a new superstar was born?
I think that yes, the answer is yes. And I think that 3 of the matches that we mentioned today, the match against Holland, Pays, the friendly match against the rest of the world, and of course the match against Scotland, that was the top level, and perhaps the moment that took Maradona to the eyes of the world.
With that, I would like to thank you once again for your participation in this series. All our respective contact information is listed on the blog and podcast uploads. So, Nacho, thank you very much and hope to continue these discussions on
Sure.
Argentine football history.
As always, it's a pleasure to be here, and I will be here for next years.
Thank you, as always.